Hello, this is Zachary George, or Zach George. I'm going to read the, uh, I'm going to read my essay. Um, didn't read I didn't read the, uh, thing thoroughly enough, thinking it was more of a rock history up to the point of the 60s. But no, instead it was the 50s of blues. So, bear with me. Yeah. So let us begin. The history of rock music. Throughout the history of music, genres such as rock has changed and evolved over time. With its humble beginnings in such places as Tin Pan Alley and in the blues, to the rock concerts of garage bands throughout America. Let us take a look at the historical journey of rock music. First, let us look at the humble beginnings as we look at popular music. During the 1910s, popular ragtime bars were getting played. Ragtime, a popular dance that was more syncopated with rhythm, was on the craze, with Scott Joplin's rags being played constantly in different venues across the United States. As well, popular music such as ragtime took off. Novelty songs were being written in places like Tin Pan Alley. Composers like George Gershwin, Richard Rodgers, and many other composers and songwriters got most of their money making songs for the public. To quote the article from Sound America, the way constant repeating of pop music in videos on MTV, many of these plug songwriters, such as Victor Yeomans, Harry Warner, and George Gershwin, worked their way up in the ranks to become vital components of the Tin Pan Alley song machine. As stated in the article, most of the popular music during the time frame was spent by Tin Pan Alley. All these songs were written by these songwriters. Next is how rock and roll got sound. The thing is about rock music is its very bluesy style. We first have to point out there where blues really started, and that was around the mid-1940s, during which African Americans migrated towards places like the Midwest, West Coast, and the Northeast side of America. When they would play songs, they would create musical idioms called R&B. R&B, or rhythm and blues, was one of the earliest forms of what modern rock tunes would be. It was mainly formed by indie labels and would be given to different jukeboxes from different states. One of the most famous blues artists was Muddy Waters. His way of playing guitar and using the amplification would bring the sounds of rock into the light of music. As said, most of these R&B songs were more independent and given the differing parts of the United States. An essay from the 1987 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame talks about the R&B in jukeboxes, which includes Muddy Waters. It states, when we started serving these outlets, we found that hits varied gently from city to city. The top 10 in New Orleans was never made into the top 10 of LA. This was because these small R&B labels were seldom in control of their own destinies. They may have just one national promotion man, if they had one at all. They shipped their records into 30 different independent distributors and had hopes that the indie distributors would get excited. About new release, promotions in the early days of R&B was very crude, in which it showed that the hardships of R&B stars and showed the early forms of what recording music was during the early days. Last, the 1960s. rock started to reach its heights as an art form. With the music technology becoming more advanced, bands started to get more experimental with their musical forms. For example, in 1966, the Beach Boys released their album Pet Sounds. With Pet Sounds, it experimented with sound mixing, going from mono to stereo, and overdubbing, getting a sort of trippy effect. Tracks like Wouldn't It Be Nice gave a more bitonal feel in the opening guitar riff. This would be followed a year later with Good Vibration, which jumpstarted the landscape for a more psychedelic rock sound. In the article from the Times, Pet Sounds came between albums made to be listened to in mono and those for stereo, between those intended to be played live and those that no longer could be, between the moments the drugs inspired pop music and the moments drugs threatened to overwhelm it. Pet Sounds, coming from an experimental side, helped kickstart the more psychedelic sounds from bands like the Beatles and Pink Floyd, which helped evolve the music of rock into the late 60s and 70s boom. The small bit of history of rock and roll, which with how much rock/pop music has changed in the small period of time, from novelty songs from Tin Pan Alley to the new sounds during the early rhythm and blues and the experimental sounds of the 60s, the sound that shaped rock into what it is.